Good day, everyone. I'm Charlene Reyes, and I'm here to report about SPSS, or the Statistical Package for Social Sciences. For my learning outcomes, at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to define and know the importance of SPSS, you'll be able to learn the basics of SPSS, and you will be able to find out how to input data and analyze them in SPSS. For my introduction, SPSS is a software for managing data and calculating a wide variety of statistics. In SPSS, the data that you have gathered and input can be used to generate tabulated reports, charts, and plots of distribution and trends, and descriptive statistical analysis. So now let's proceed with my report. So in SPSS, you have three main windows. So these three main windows helps you see your statistical output, see your data, and see any programming commands you have written. So these three main windows are the data editor window, the syntax editor window, and the output viewer window. So let us first discuss about the data editor window. Upon opening our SPSS program, so I'm just gonna open my SPSS program. Okay, so upon opening the SPSS program, you'll be directed with a window that asks you what you would like to do. So in this case, you just have to click cancel since we're just starting. And then another window is open, and that is the data editor window. So in here, as you can see, it is just like an Excel worksheet since it contains a menu bar at the top and a spreadsheet-like window. Okay, so the data editor window lets you see and manipulate your data. It provides two complementary ways for inspecting data, which are referred to as the data view and the variable view. So it is seen here at the bottom part of the window. Here's the data view, here, and then here's the variable view. So for the parts of the data view, we can see the toolbar in here, which contains some handy tools for our statistical analysis. Then the columns of cells are called variables. Then the rows are called cases. And when we enter data into the cells, so the cell contents are called values. Then for the variable view, the rows represent here the variables instead of the cases. Then in the variable view, we are not seeing our actual data values, but instead a lot of information about our variables. Later, I'll discuss further the difference of using the data view and the variable view. So the columns now represent the variable properties such as the label, the name, and the type. Let us now proceed with the entering of data in SPSS. And as we go on with the discussion, you will be also familiarized with the other windows in SPSS. Okay, so before I start entering data in SPSS, uh, I have here a sample questionnaire which we will use as a guide. So it involves different types of questions uh, wherein I will teach you how to input each in SPSS. So here it is. So this is not an actual questionnaire. I just made this up for the purpose of this discussion in SPSS. So as you can see, the first question involves personal information of the respondents. So it asks about the name, the gender, the height, and the weight. So the next part of the questionnaire is the start of the survey. In here, the first question asks about, do you use social networking sites? So this is an example of a yes/no question. It is obvious, isn't it? That the respondent is asked whether he uses social networking sites or not. So later on, I'll teach you how to input this type of question after I have introduced the other types of questions. Next, for question number 2, this asks, what social networking sites do you usually use? So in here, this is an example of a multiple response question. It is called such because the respondents are given choices and they may pick one or more from the choices given. So let's say, for example, I am one of the respondents and I usually use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as a social networking site. So I could just tick Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So for my answers. The next question is, what social networking site do you prefer? So this is different from the previous question that we have in question number 2 because it speaks about it asks for an answer, only one answer. So I have included this question in my questionnaire because I would like to emphasize the difference between inputting multiple response questions from inputting this type of question, which refers only one answer. The last question that I have is an example of a question with a Likert scale. It is called such since it shows ranking from being excellent down to very unsatisfactory. Okay, so we open our data editor window. Okay, data editor window. Then in entering data in SPSS, so as a start, we will be starting in the variable view. So as you can notice, there are already titles indicated in the upper columns, which are the name, the type, the width, the decimals, the label, the values, the missing, columns, align, and measure. The first attribute of each variable is its name. So the variable name is how the data column is identified in the programming language, although it has certain restrictions. But before I discuss these restrictions, let us first try to input some data from our questionnaire. So I'll open my questionnaire. So beginning with the personal information, this is how you input them in SPSS. So under the name column, of course, you will type in name since it is the first thing that is asked in our questionnaire. Then the next column will be the gender. So as you can see, if you have typed name and then clicked enter or pressed enter, some words will appear. The gender, the height, then the weight. So, so in indicating the name, it must begin with a letter and may be made up of characters, numerals, non-punctuation characters, and period. So the variable names here may be up to 64 characters long. So other restrictions in this tab is that you cannot use hyphens or spaces because it is considered as an illegal character here. So I will show you. So let's say, for example, I want to write under the name of respondent by using space and then press enter. So a window will pop up that says variable name contains an illegal character. Just click OK. So, as you can see, hyphens and spaces are not allowed. But if you really need to use spaces, or if you really need to indicate two or more words under the name, you could just use um, underscores or periods to separate your words under the name. So I'll just clear this because we will not be using it. Okay. So the next one is the type. So the type, this speaks about what type of information you will input. The basic variable types are either numeric or string. So numeric or string, if your data to input are words such as in name, so you would change it the numeric into string. Just click this button beside numeric under the type, and then click string. Then OK. So that's it. and then you could just change the others based on what data you would input in your in SPSS. So, however, SPSS allows you to select among several different standard formats for displaying numeric data. So you have also different choices, not just numeric and string, but the numeric and string are the most common. So you could use scientific notation, date, dollar, currency, comma, dot, and so on. Okay, so the next attribute would be the label. So the label is just simply a longer description that is displayed in place of the variable name. So for example, uh, under the name you could write name of respondent. So it is not necessary to use underscores or periods instead of um, spaces. So you could just include spaces here now because it is just the label. So the values for the next attribute would be the values. The values attribute allows you to create a list of value labels. So to illustrate, let's take as an example the gender of the respondent. So under the value attribute, we can assign values for male and female since of course the gender has two choices, male and female. Just have to click again the small icon beside none under the values. Then value can write 1 for male, then add 2 for female, then add, then press OK. Okay, so in the data view, instead of typing male and female in the gender part, you could just use 1 or 2. The next attribute would be the missing. The missing attribute is a place for you to designate certain data values that you want SPSS to ignore when it calculates statistics. For instance, in survey data, it is not impossible to have a respondent that answered I don't know in response to a question, or simply he skipped answering the questions. And you could and for this you could assign a value to it in a variable as if they were a missing data. So in short terms, let's say for example, I don't want to indicate my gender in the survey data that I'm answering, so I would just skip it. So if I would enter it in PSS instead of um, uh, putting NA or skipping the cell, you just have to assign value for it, which means that the respondent skipped the question. So I will assign number 3 if the respondent didn't answer this question. So 3. So the other attributes, the width, the decimals, the columns, align, and measure, are just minor settings related to the data display. So the width simply pertains to the maximum number of characters that you can input or you can write under the name. So under the cells. So let's say for example in here I put 8. So in the width for the name, it limits me to write here only names which contains 8 characters or less. But let's say for example I want to write the full name of my respondents, then I could click this button here and increase the number of the width there. Next, in the decimal attribute, so this is the number of decimals to include in your data. It is usually used especially with those numeric variables which involve the use of decimals, of course. Let's say, for example, one of the data that I will input in SPSS is currency or amount. So I need to here indicate here the decimal if I would want to write the centavos for each. Yeah. Okay, so since I'm not using any data with regards to decimals, then I have indicated here 0. The next the next attribute is the columns. So the columns is just simply the width of the column itself. So let's see the data view. So in the data view here, this is the columns right there. And then we will go to the variable view. As you can see, it has small space. Then if we are going to put the full name of our respondent, then it will require a larger space for the column. So we'll just increase the number here. Okay, there. And then we'll see what happens. So as you can see, the space for this column has increased or has gotten longer. So the next attribute is the align. So it's just simply asks you whether your data, you would want your data to be left aligned, right aligned, or center. Okay. Then the last is the measure. So it just gives you a choice whether your data input are nominal, ordinal, or scale. So nominal for those categories that are those variables that are categorical, ordinal with those that are categorical but have ranking, and then for the scale which pertains to intervals or ratios. Okay, so since you are already somehow familiarized with the data editor window, we will now start entering our data. So I have here 5 samples of answered surveys which we will input in SPSS. So this is just an example. Okay, so answered questionnaires. We'll start inputting our data in the variable view. Okay, so let's go to the data view to start entering our data. Okay. So I have here, let's go to the data view to start entering our data. So our first, okay, so under this column, of course, we'll write under the name, first respondent is Paul, next is Ralph, then Don, and Alice, and then Lori. So that is the under our name. Then for the gender, since we have assigned, as we can remember, I have assigned 1 for male and 2 for female, then we will indicate it here. So 1 for male, then Ralph is male, Don is male, Alicia is female, and Lori is female. Then for the height, so we could just input their height, 165, 171, 152, 150, and 158. And then for the weight, I have here 50 kilograms, 60, 45, 46, and 47. So that's how you input the data that you have. So next, after inputting this data about personal information, let us now proceed in inputting data based on the questions, different types of questions that I have. So for the yes or no question, first, do you use social networking sites? So let's go back to the variable view. Okay, for the name, I will write social networking sites. Okay. So since this is a yes or no question, I would assign in the values, okay, first label use of social networking sites. I will assign in the values yes or no. 1 for yes, 2 for no. And then click OK. So then we will assign another missing value if the respondents failed to answer this type of question. So I'll write 3. Okay, now we will input the answered questionnaire, that I have gathered. So social networking sites. So for their answers, Paul said yes, Ralph said yes, Don said yes, Alicia said yes, and Lori said no. For the next question, what social networking sites do you usually use? So this is an example of a multiple response question. So in inputting this type of question, we will have to indicate, or we will have to add them the choices one by one here in the variable view. So the choices, we have 5 choices: Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and others. So it's not necessary to write label. So 1, we will write here 1 for yes, add 2 for no, click add, okay, and then do the same with the others. Then okay, so there you have it. And then for the missing values, I will assign again 3 for those that didn't answer this question. Okay, so there. So under the data view, we will now input the answers of our respondents. Okay. So in here for Paul, the social networking sites that he usually use are Facebook and Twitter. So 1, yes for Facebook, yes for Twitter, no for Instagram, no for Tumblr, and no for others. Then for Ralph, no for Facebook, yes for Twitter, no for Instagram, yes for Tumblr, no for others. Next for Instagram, for Dawn it's Instagram. Then no for Facebook, no for Twitter, no, yes for Instagram, no for Tumblr, and no for others. The next one is for Alicia. Yes for Facebook, no for Twitter, yes for Instagram, yes for Tumblr, and no for others. In Dora's case, since she did not answer because she answered no, no in the first question, that she does not use social networking sites, so just indicate 3. Missing value. Did not answer this question. So that's how you input multiple response questions here in SPSS. Next, for the next question, what social networking site do you prefer? So, preferred social networking site. So in here, the difference between inputting this type of question to the multiple response question is that you could assign values to it instead of including them one by one in the variable view. So 1 for Facebook, 2 for Twitter, 3 for Instagram, then 4 for Tumblr, and then 5 for others. Click add, then okay. So let us now input it in our data view, their answers. So in here, Paul prefers Twitter, so we write 2. Ralph prefers Twitter too, so we write 2. Don prefers Instagram, so we write 3. Then Alicia prefers Facebook, and I forgot to assign missing value. So since our values, I have indicated values 1 to 5, so I cannot use 3 in here, so I'll just use 99 instead. Okay, so I'll put 99 here. So that's how you input this one. So for our last question, it asks about how do you rate social networking site that you use based on its features and functions. So in here, it's just the same with our previous question that we have input. So I'll indicate here the rate of social networking sites. Spaces are not allowed. There. So in here, under the values, you would assign values for each one for excellent, 2 for very satisfactory, 3 for satisfactory, 4 for unsatisfactory, and then 5 for very unsatisfactory. Okay. So for none, I'll assign again 99. There. Okay. So Paul rated the social networking site very satisfactory, so 2. Then Ralph skipped, so 99. Excellent. Then satisfactory, 3. And then for Lori, she split it, of course. So this is now our finished output after entering all the information that we need to use, that we have gathered in our SPS, in our questionnaire. So this is how you input it in SPSS. So for our next discussion, after we have input this data in SPSS, the next part that I'm going to show you is how to analyze this data. So as you can see at the top part of SPSS, just click Analyze, and then you'll see many statistical tools such as finding the correlation, the descriptive statistics, the regression, the comparing means, multiple response, and so on. So these are the tools that we can use to analyze our data. So I have here the standard methods for analysis after entering our data. So in determining the methods used for analysis, used after entering data in SPSS, there are 2 things to consider. So those things to consider are the hypothesis and the nature of your variables. So let's say for an example, my hypothesis is there is a relationship between A and B. So the statistical methods that you can use here is the chi-square test for association. I'm sorry for that. Chi-squared, Pearson's correlation, the Spearman's-Rowe correlation, and the chi-square. So if your hypothesis is about knowing the relationship between variables, then you can use this 4. But then you should also consider the nature of the variables. So are your variables both categorical? So you use chi-squared test for association. If your variables are both scale, then you use Pearson's correlation. If your variables are scale and ordinal, you may use Spearman's-Rowe correlation. And if your variables are scale and nominal, you will use chi-square. The next hypothesis that we may have is having the difference in a population means between A and B. So in this case, you can use t-tests, Mann-Whitney, or Wilcoxon. Next, for the difference in means across several groups, so you can use here ANOVA or regression. So to have you an example of the analysis, I have here a sample null hypothesis which I just made. So my first null hypothesis is there is no relationship between the weight and height of the respondents. So since I am speaking here about the relationship between my variables, then I will pick a statistical tool here in this part. So I will just have to consider the nature of my variables. So since in here I am talking about the weight and height of my respondents, then and they are both scale, then I will use Pearson correlation. So this is how you will analyze your data in SPSS. So let's try Pearson correlation. So you just click analyze, correlate, by variate, then you have to click height and then the weight. Okay, so just take Pearson and then the testing of significance, whether two-tailed or one-tailed. Then options, so these are just further options if you want to indicate the means and standard deviations of your height and weight, so you can use it. And then continue and then press OK. So in here, we'll just wait for our analysis to pop up. Okay, so this window is one of those windows that I was talking about a while ago. So this is the output viewer window. So the output viewer window, this is where you will see all those uh, all those tables that you have indicated in your statistical tools. So somehow these are the answers or the results of your actions in the SPSS data editor window. So in here, as you can see, to interpret this type of tables, so this is the descriptive statistics that we have clicked if I want to see the mean and standard deviation under the options. And then this is the correlation. So below, if the correlation is significant at the 0.05 level, so then there is an asterisk beside the number. So as you can see in interpreting here, 0.903 in here, it has a mark or an asterisk. So which means that the height and the weight of the respondents have a significant relationship. So they have a significant relationship. Another thing that we can use to interpret this one is the significance. So um, if the significance is less than or equal to 0.05, then they have a significant relationship. So as you can see in the significance, we have 0.036, which is lower than 0.05, which means that the respondent's height and weight is really having a significant relationship. So another thing that we have to consider is that if we have a positive correlation, this means that if the if the first variable increases, then the next variable the second variable tends to increase also. But if we have a negative Pearson correlation, then it has also a negative relationship, which means that as one variable goes up or increases, the other variable goes down. So that's how you analyze your data based on the Pearson's correlation. The next hypothesis that I have is there's no significant difference in the gender to the social networking site the respondents prefer. Okay, so I'll return here. So analyze, since I'm looking for one-way ANOVA. So one-way ANOVA because this is a test on the means across several groups. Several groups because gender, we have male and female, and then networking sites that we prefer, we have the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and others. So we have several groups. So analyze, compare means, and then one-way ANOVA. So for my factor, we have gender. And then for my dependent list, preferred social networking sites. And then post hoc. So if you want, again, to include descriptive in your results, so you can just click them, then press continue, and then okay. So again, the output viewer pops up to let us view our results. So here is our results for one-way ANOVA. So okay, so these are our results for one-way ANOVA. So this is just the descriptives, and then for one-way ANOVA, to interpret this type of statistical tool, we will just have to see the significance. So again, if the significance level is less than or equal to 0.05, then there is a significant difference between the social networking sites and the gender. But as we can see, our significance level is 0.184, which means that preferred social networking sites does not have a significant difference um, when pertained to the gender of our respondents. So the last window that we haven't discussed yet is the syntax window. So the syntax window is just simply there. It's an example. So the syntax window is just simply uh, this is just simply a window that lets you view your action. So when you open a file, so it's just indicated get file, stuff like that. Okay, so here so this is the end of my report about SPSS.